So in this video, we're going to have a look at working through probability using tree diagrams. So we've got our scenario here. So we have an experiment that involves two coin tosses. So part A, we have to complete a tree diagram to show all the possible outcomes. Part B, we need to find the total number of outcomes. And part C, we need to find these three probabilities that we have down the bottom here. So for part A, complete a tree diagram to show all possible outcomes. So what we do with our tree diagram, we need to do different branches. Yeah. So because it's tossing a coin, there are only two different outcomes from the first coin toss. So we've got heads up here, we've got tails down here. So H and T, the heads and tails. But because we're doing two coin tosses, we have to do a second step. Because we're doing this experiment with replacement, that means we still keep both outcomes. So we've got heads here and heads. So we're going to make that a little bit smaller so we've got a bit more room to work. So let's just do a little one here. So if we go heads and heads, then we've got heads and tails. Then here we've got tails and heads. And then we've got tails and tails. So this is our tree diagram here. I'm going to go over our branches in different colors just so that we can distinguish between. We've got our branches here. So that's our tree diagram. Now we're going to look at our next step. So go back, the total number of outcomes. So our outcomes is just what we have, our final outcomes, or our final product. So we've got one here with heads, heads. We've got heads, tails, tails, heads, and tails, tails. So let's get rid of those. So we'll go through those four. And clearly we have four outcomes. Four outcomes. So now our final question, part C, what's the probability of tossing two tails? Let's go back in. So part C, question I, getting two tails. So we've got a four outcomes so that we know it's going to be over four. So because it's out of four different outcomes, we have four as our denominator. So we need to find out what the probability of tossing two tails is. So there's only one of these four options have two tails. That means it's going to be 1 out of 4. So for our next question, which one has got one tail? You can just see there. How many have one tail, or the probability of flipping one tail? So we've got heads, heads. Nope. Heads, tails. Yes, that's got one tail. Tails, heads. Yes, that's got one tail. Tails, tails. That's got two tails. So we're not going to include that one because of the wording, and we'll go through that with the third one. That'll really become clear why we're not including that. So for I, we had two options, tails, tails. So with one set of tails out of our four outcomes. So 2 on 4, which is also equal to 1 on 2. And then our final one, I, we have at least one head. So that you can see the wording difference there in having one head and having at least one head. We got at least one head. Does HH have at least one head? Yes, it does. Does HT? Yes, it does. TH does as well, but TT doesn't. So that means we've got 3 out of our 4 options have at least one head. So we'll put that down here. Is equal to 3 on 4. And that's our final solution.